What's up, guys? Chris here with Gaming Kinda. Once again, huge thanks to all of you new guys hanging out. Welcome. This is where I just talk about things related to games, and today we're going to be talking a little bit more about my opinion on the multi-box ban, as well as a slight update on some clarity that Blizzard shared. This is because I noticed a number of you kind of speaking in the comments about whether or not you liked this change. I've talked to a number of you in the community. I've also had a chance to go out and kind of listen to some responses to it, and namely today the response that I'll probably reference the most is Want to Buy Gold's hour-long post on multiboxing. He is not the single and most prestigious authority on multiboxing. He is simply a guy that was not on the side of necessarily like really being interested in multiboxing, and over the last year has become interested in multiboxing. And I thought that some parts of his opinion were definitely worth kind of taking note of, and were kind of the thing that pushed me over on making more of a post about this, sharing my thoughts. Because in the first post, I tried to just share the news and just kind of get it out there and show why people would like it and why people wouldn't, without really kind of stating my opinion too much. Just get the news out the door, because it is something that is drastic and needs to be known, and people need to be aware of it, because at the end of the day, it's Blizzard's game, and if something's against terms of service, then it's gone, whether you like that thing or not. So, as an update, they did clarify owning multiple accounts, running multiple instances of the same game, having 5 or 6 WoWs running across your screen. That's not what's against the rules. The use of broadcasting software is what's against the rules. That thing that makes it to where when you push one key on your keyboard, that it sends a signal to multiple instances of the client. That is what is against the rules. Keep in mind, because of terms of service, WoW could already see other applications running on your server, on your computer, anytime you have the game running. I assume even if the launcher is just up, and so they would have already known if you were running botting software, or if you're running something like IS Boxer. The reason they said they banned this was for the sake of the community, and because it's by botters. They made it sound like botters was the key, not just that a widespread portion of the community dislikes it, which I think would be an opinion that I would not be able to push back against as much, or because we're having trouble balancing the game between, I guess, what we'll call normal play and what this handful of players. I assume multi-box accounts probably only makes up 100, maybe on the high end 200,000 accounts out of what is very likely millions of active accounts at any given time, but they don't necessarily reveal their data that transparently. And what we would have to do is we'd have to go look at like how many people use ISBox, or there's a number of services. And so from that perspective, I think that's where I draw my first issue with this. I think that's as a general statement, I disagree with this change to the game, and it has a lot to do with their reasoning. They said that this was to stop botters, and if that is really the case, anybody who runs botting software, they don't need multi-boxing to be effective, because they can already run multiple instances and then just have the botting software do it. They don't need IS Boxer to do that. Bots also are generally trying not to get banned. Some are better at that than others. Sometimes you come across that something is just running in a circle, killing things repeatedly, and it's like face first into a tree, and it's like, okay, that's a poorly written bot. But a well-written bot, some of these bots that can scan the ground as they go, and they can adjust dynamically, and they can vary their path, and they know how to respond to general messages, or they know to flag an alert to a user that's maybe looking over a field of bots, who can then hop in and respond to that GM or whoever's testing them. They know what to do if the monster they're trying to kill isn't there. Level boost bots and things like that know like how to level you from 1 to 60, all the way through following scripts that can dynamically try to gauge where will they be the monster I need to kill for this, and can farm their way all the way up. They don't need multi-boxing. They could do this anyway. So will this get rid of bots? No, because those bots function without this software. Now, maybe they were using the software to make them more efficient. Maybe they weren't. But I think going after this, instead of just targeting bots, which they ban bots all the time, every successful MMO does, they know how to find bots. They're different games that have different levels of quality as far as, but like I remember times when there were a lot more botters in this game than there are now, it seems. Maybe because of sharding, I just don't see them. But I would say that this won't stop botters, and so this does feel a little bit like punishing a group of players because there happens to be a set of people among you that are abusing it. And that starts to become like an ethical concern. That starts to be that starts to reminisce like how we decide things in real life. Once by Gold referenced like gun control, because a handful of people use guns to do bad things. Should we do it on behalf of on the whole? And I think in my mind that comes down to risk. The first and foremost goal of a game is to protect the experience of everybody else, right? So as long as you're not hurting anybody else, what you're doing doesn't really matter. So that's why in single player games, they don't need to try to go out and shut down exploits and shut down cheats. And they may even have Easter eggs and cheat codes in the game because it doesn't matter. You're not hurting anybody else's experience. And if you want to ruin yours by cheating your way to the last boss, knock yourself out. There's whole speedrunning communities that exploit games as a community. That's their objective. But when you get into an MMO, you are affecting someone else's play. And so first and foremost, you have to stop that harassment. And that harassment takes place in a number of ways. Botters do it by just cheapening your experience, right? They can sell things on the market on an auction house for little to nothing because they don't have any time in the game, right? So it's free. So they just have to get above the cost of the account and the cost of the hardware that the account's on. And so they can afford to go farm materials and sell that, and they sell gold for real money. They can afford to operate it. That ruins that. If another player is going in and killing quest mobs over and over that they don't need just so that you can't, and they're slash emoting at you, that can get them in trouble, and for good reason, right? They're going out of their way to ruin your day. And so I think when you're hurting someone else's play, that's where I draw a line with things. And so it's a question of does the thing that the multiboxer is doing do that, whether or not they're multiboxing? I could take that part out of the sentence and it's still true. If you take that same player and you drop them onto one account, or you take it to where it's a group of 5 players who are each controlling each of their 5 accounts separately, it's still the same griefing. It's still the same trolling. It's still garbage. Like it still doesn't belong in a game that is meant to be a shared experience. And so banning broadcast software doesn't fix the problems that they're saying it went out to fix. So my issue with the ban is not actually an issue with whether or not we should have multiboxers in the game. That's a different debate. It's that I don't think that the reason they said is a good reason. So that either is their real reason, or that's the reason they thought would hold the most water, and they're not ready to tell us the real reasons, because it may have been something that they thought either we were too dumb to understand or was going to muddy the water because it's actually a series of complex reasons. And it's like, you know what, I think it's negatively affecting this and negatively affecting this, and you know what, let's just get rid of it. And instead of explaining that thought to us, because they didn't want to take the time to do it, they said, let's just make a big bad villain over here and say, oh, well, it's going to stop botters. And then my issue with that argument is now, if I'm playing the game and I find a bot, I'm just going to be frustrated because you took away something from the community, whether or not I was a multiboxer. You took something away in order to fix this behavior that didn't get fixed. So did they just lose their way of playing for no reason? And the reason I get defensive of that is I don't always want to play current content. Sometimes there's an expansion that I don't engage with, and I don't want to necessarily stop playing World of Warcraft just because your current content cycle doesn't interest me. So thankfully, this game has all sorts of other things. I can go back and do archaeology. I can go back and do PvP. I can twink. I can go run M+. I can raid. I can do old raids. I can do, in the current content, I'll be able to do Torghast Tower. I can farm up old reputations. I can level an allied race. I can do all of these things. And it might be that I like one of those things so much that I do it a lot. I go try to get every recipe for tailoring. That would be a huge task. And I could go try to do that. And I just do all the necessary content to unlock that. Now imagine for a second that whichever one of those things I listed, or the ones I didn't list, just got taken out of the game. You know what? We think that M+ players are the most toxic players in the game, that M+ streamers are the worst, and that all these M+ guides, and then they're selling M+ runs for gold, and they result in that's where all the people selling these boost runs come from, and it cheapens the game. And some of those players that sell those boosts and stuff, like the Gallywinks community, it turns out that some of them might have been selling that for RMT, real money. Oh my goodness. you know what? We should probably just ban all of M+. We should probably just remove it. We should probably, they're selling these Jaina runs. Some of those people might be selling that gold for money. And so we should just remove the Jaina raid altogether. As a matter of fact, let's just not do raiding in future expansions. That's what this feels like. That's a stupid argument. Because a handful of people abuse something, you don't ban a whole system, you ban those people. And so I think, yes, are there multi-boxers that are griefing? Are there multi-boxers that are, you go into an area and they're killing a quest mob among other things? Yes. Are there multi-boxers you show up to a 4x2 farm and they're already there and you ask to join and they tell you to shove off? Yes. But in my mind, that's no more toxic of behavior than if it was 7 individual players who were blocking you out of a farm, right? 8 individual players. That it doesn't matter. The behavior is the issue, not the fact that one person's doing it. Now, they claim that it's a form of that it's automation. But in the past, they've clearly defined the difference between broadcasting software, which is not automation, it's not botting, versus botting, which is automation. And what is the difference there? Automation is when I have something do something for me where I don't have to do any input, right? It's going to fish repeatedly and click the bobber, cast. Click the bobber, cast, click the bobber, cast. And I can go away for the weekend and I can come back and have 50 million fish. That's botting, right? It's going to queue up for PvP, hop into PvP, run around in the zone, collect the honor, queue up for PvP again. That's botting. What is the difference? Isn't this just the same thing? No. Broadcasting software is just saying that every time I push a key on this keyboard, that it's going to send that key press to multiple instances of the game. So that would be like if I had to push a button and I had 4 buttons and I instead push my hand down with 4. At the end of the day, if I do not push my hand down, nothing happens. All we're saying is that when something happens, I want it to happen identically. And so any one of those characters, if you just single it out, it does nothing without me. It does not move forward. It does not move backward. It does not mine. It does nothing. It literally only moves when I move. So multi-boxing without this broadcasting software for like herbalism, for example, if a set of druids were to all be on follow with each other, and then every time they got to a node, they clicked on an instance of the game, they right-clicked the node, and then as it was harvesting, they went click, right-click, click, right-click, click, right-click, click, right-click. Through all of their active accounts on their computer, they're doing this. What broadcast software allows them to do is say, when I right-click, I want you to tell each of these games individually to right-click. As a result, it actually changes the way people play. They don't get as intimate of a relationship with that one character. And so there are farms that don't function. They have trouble with skinning because each thing can only be skinned once, so having a group doesn't help you. And the way you would get around that is many multi-boxers run across multiple servers so that they can engage with different markets, or they do it all on one server and they funnel things to a character. Well, even if you could get those all into different shards or all on different servers, right? Maybe you're skinning inside an instance, so they're all in their own version of the instance. The problem there is not everything always spawns in the same spot. Like how do I kill things where I can, when I right click in the same spot? So there's certain farms that don't function for them. Running old raids for Mog, it gets really hard with some instances to do it on multiboxing. So it changes the way they play. It makes them less optimal because now you don't just get to turn left when one character needs to turn left. You have to turn left and it turns all the characters left. So it makes them less efficient in trade for now you're trying to command a whole team, right? So if you think about people that micro within like StarCraft 2, most of us when we play StarCraft 2, you're grabbing a selection of units and you're all sending them in. That's not nearly as efficient as if you were just controlling one of those units. And so it's not automation. It's not automation by their own blue posts in the past. It doesn't remove the botting. It doesn't fix the issue. So I need them to either change why they're saying they're banning it, or I think this is a bad ban. I think this is a bad read on the situation. Does it harm the game? Well, does it hurt me that they're in the game? You know what? When I'm mining, it's frustrating when 10 druids fly in front of me and harvest the whole node. But the problem with that is that they set it up that way. They set it to where party loot functions a certain way. They set it up to where a node has a fixed number of multi-taps. What if instead it can only be tapped one time per account, per battle.net account, right? Would that fix it? Yes, because there would be no use in having 10 druids do it. Are there other options? And I'm not saying that option doesn't have its own series of problems. It does. There is no perfect single solution. But the issue is, does that feel like harassment? Not any more than if a raid group was flying in front of me and harvesting the whole node. And so if one player can do it or 10 players can do it, it makes no difference to me. This game is large enough that I will come across groups. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I've been part of raids that go corium farm into Grand. That means that every time we all harvest all the nodes, we all fly out and we're causing force spawning. And then every time a corium node is found, somebody flags it, we all fly to that spot, we all harvest the node at the same time. And that way we all get the corium. And it drastically drives up the amount of corium we get. And we don't hurt each other because we're doing it cross server. So even when we go to list that corium or list items made from that corium, we're not listing against each other because most of us are not on the same server. And so we're all coming out ahead, and we have this distinct advantage over anybody that's not in that. 4x2 farms, right? 2 groups of 4 players. It makes no difference if those are from 8 different players across 8 different servers, or if it's 1 player across all 8. It's still, they have an advantage over me as an individual player. So I don't know that this hurts my ability to play any more than anything that can be done by groups or by raids. It doesn't make it any different. Lowering the barrier to entry isn't the problem. The fact that that feels like harassment in the first place is really the issue. And they're not removing that from the game. Grouping will still have a huge distinct advantage. Group farms will still way outproduce. Force spawning, party loot, multi-tap on nodes, these are things that cause where when gamed out, when optimized, you have somebody that can take it from a solo player getting 200, 500, 1,000 of something in an hour to not just, oh, well, it's just times 8. It is not times 8. When you start to trigger things like force spawning, when you start to 2x4 where each mob is dropping 8 times the loot, you're starting to get multiples like times 5, times 10, times 100 when people optimize this stuff out. Where sitting in an optimized farm and standing still, you can get 100 times something where somebody's going around and actually feeling like they're playing the game. Me on my boomkin, standing still and pushing a key over and over, and then pushing my looterang once every X number of minutes, or flying to all these piles of bodies, or flying to a different monk statue. It doesn't feel like standard gameplay, and it's unbelievably optimized, and I'm making way more money doing it, and it has nothing to do with multiboxing. Banning multiboxing doesn't fix it. So why ban multiboxing? If you want to ban it, give me a real reason. I'm totally fine with you banning it. And just to make it clear here, I'm somebody who does not feel negatively impacted by multiboxing, but I'm not positively benefited by it either because I don't multibox. I play on Mac. I can't multibox. So it's not even an option. Am I interested in it? Yes. Do I go learn about it? Yes, but I learn about all kinds of things. YouTube is a big rabbit hole of just diving down and learning about cabinet making or how to raise your own chickens for eggs. And I know all this crap because I'm interested in it. It doesn't mean I do it. So I'm just telling you this from my point of view. It doesn't help. Now, does it do anything good for the game? Yes, it drives sub numbers way up artificially because you have this group of people, right? Say there's 10,000 multiboxers in the whole world, but those people on average have 5 accounts or 8 accounts. They're paying for those with WoW tokens typically because most of them don't want to pay with 5 or 8 or 16 or 40 times the money every month. Those WoW tokens are purchased at $20 a piece by people that want to buy the gold that they're spending to buy tokens. So there is a huge revenue component with this that Blizzard is flushing down the toilet that they're going to have to make back to make their sub numbers look good to the shareholders who don't care about the number of active users, but about the money that is extracted from them. So the average money per player and the total number of players is dropping. And so when it drops, they're going to make that back by increasing pushes to cash sales or having bad news for shareholders. Us, in the meantime, they farm things. They farm the crap out of things. And it's not necessarily about any one person. I don't care how it gets to the market. It makes no difference to me if I buy my cloth from a player who did it in a group of 8 or a player who did it as 8 accounts. Like I said, many multi-boxers that I follow and watch actually have their characters split across more than one server because they generate so many items per hour. It's not just about diversifying across markets. It's that literally there isn't a market for the rate at which they can generate items. So they're supplying to multiple servers. So whatever server that person's main on will continue to have them maybe doing it in groups and things like that optimally. But all those other servers, that's going to fall by the wayside because they're not going to go play again and again and again on across all those servers unless the thing they do is the way they make money is tied to things like crafting cooldowns or something like that, where it does still benefit them to have multiple characters diversified, but it has to be a farming method where it doesn't penalize them that they play those characters separately, as opposed to playing them all simultaneously. Now, what this does mean is it's a great time to start getting into solo farming. Sometimes some farms are better for me to make gold as a single instance of WoW player, as just, I guess, a normal player, as a solo boxer. It's good for me that I now have more ways to play because previously I felt like I could compete in things like skinning farms. I sold a lot of transmog. I sell enchants because I find that that's something that multiboxing doesn't really give you a distinct advantage in necessarily, because I sell enchants with all the enchanting materials I get from the transmog that I get while farming transmog that isn't worth enough to list or isn't selling well enough. So I sell all the expensive stuff. I disenchant all the crappy stuff. I take those materials, I turn them into enchants. My enchanters I've had since 2004, so I have a huge number of enchants, not all of them, but I have a pretty decent stock across a variety of expansions. So that's been what works for me, and multiboxing doesn't touch that market. Now instead, I didn't ever want to go farm up my Vial of the Sands recipe and try to sell Vial of the Sands, because the way you sell Vial of the Sands profitably as of today is that you go multi-box all the materials, or you purchase them from multi-boxes. And I just didn't want to get into a market that was that competitive with people who have an advantage over me because they have all these characters leveled and they have hardware that can run this software that allows them to do something that I cannot do as effectively as them, compared to going and beating them at a market that they can't touch me in. So it's a great time for people that want to diversify the way they play. And they could reverse the decision on this. They could back down on this. It does feel like they singled IS Boxer or something like it out. They do still allow you to run multiple instances of the game. I know there's people who do that for RP reasons, or there will be people who want to cancel scan running on a second account all the time. They'll have their auction account and then they'll have their main account so that while they're raiding, they can have cancel scans running. So there will still be ways to play across multiple accounts. It just won't be nearly as prevalent. I think if they're going to try to give a good reason to have this ban stay in place on this behavior, and it's such a reversal of years and years and years of them not only condoning this, but confirming it and seeming to design systems to account for it, allowing you to have eight instances of World of Warcraft running under one battle.net account, allowing, the power of macros, and is already macros are able to do things that I don't need, that multi-boxers use. The ability to join groups, the ability to put people on follow, all those things, like macros don't need to do that for a normal player in my opinion, but they do, and multi-boxers use them. So, but so do botters. So I think in my opinion, like, if they want to reverse their decision on this and they want to bring it back, that would be fine. But at this point, they've opened this can of worms, and they're going to make people mad regardless. If they're doing this because they said, you know what, when we design farming content, as Once by Gold talked about, when we design content, we only want this much coming out per hour, and so optimized. Removing multi-boxers isn't the problem. So if that's not going to solve that issue. So if that's the issue, if they feel, then in my mind, they need to go back and reverse decisions like party loot. They need to go back and reverse decisions like multi-tapping. They need to go back and reverse decisions on the way loot functions. The amount of loot being added to the game has gone way, way up over recent expansions. And if that's created a balance issue for them, then they need to reverse those decisions. Not whether or not I can play two characters at the same time suboptimally by basically having two keyboards. Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to fix the problem. Does it remove a way to play that maybe I don't understand if I'm somebody from the outside looking in? Yes. Maybe I artificially attribute that group of people to the reason I can't do things. The reason I didn't get a Brutosaur was because of multi-boxers. That's simply not true. That is simply not true. You just didn't get a Brutosaur. Are there ways to make money that multi-boxers can't do? Yes. Are there ways to make money off of multi-boxers? Yes. If they're selling materials dirt cheap, then go craft those into things. Is undercutting still going to be a thing? Yes. Are those players that were playing optimally across multiple accounts still going to play optimally? Yes. You are not going to gain anything by removing multi-boxers other than knowing that there's a group of people that play differently than you that had their way of life removed and threatened after years of being supported, condoned, and literally all but implemented by Blizzard. So just know that this now says that if some other behavior pops up, what if next they get rid of carries? Right? What about the whole carry community? All these people selling Mythic Plus boosts, all these people selling raid clears for getting the mount. What if they get rid of that next? What if after that they get rid of, like there are plenty of ways to play in this game that are not the majority, that maybe you don't engage with at all, that don't necessarily deserve to be banned just because you don't like them. So I know this was a long post. I was trying to kind of respond to all the points that Want to Buy Gold made at least. His post was an hour, so I think I did pretty good coming out in just less than half. I could talk for a lot longer about this. This is much more of a conversation. This is much more, there's a lot of gray area in this, and it's not as simple as multi-boxing bad, not multi-boxing good. It's just not that straightforward. So I need a real reason from Blizzard to feel like this was a good decision. Until then, it's just a ban. It doesn't actually fix the core issues they're saying that they were seeking to fix. So all they're doing is shining light on those problems. They're not actually correcting them. And in the process, they hurt a group of people who, in my opinion, weren't directly hurting anybody with the way they played. They were just playing. And that's no different than Mythic Plus people selling carries. That's no different than Mythic Raiders having better gear than me. That's no different than crafters having more money than me. That's no different than, any of these different ways to play having some advantage over me because they've optimized and put the time in to something that I haven't taken part in. So let me know down below. I wanted to put more of my actual opinion on it and not just report on the news because I got so much feedback, both from you guys and, from friends and seeing other creators respond to it. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.